Alright guys, today we're going to be looking at a very important feature that you would need in almost any application, and I'm talking about forms. Forms provide a great way for us to actually collect input from our end users. And how can we actually achieve that in React? So today let's actually implement a React application. It's going to be a very simple one, but we will actually be implementing a form which has various fields such as an input field, a text area field, a select field, a checkbox, and finally we will also make use of a React hook library to actually help us achieve all of this. So let's get started. Firstly, let's create a sample React app. So before that, let me create a folder for this. So let me go into the folder, and we will use our favorite create React app toolchain to do this. So let's copy this command, which is npx create React app and then my app, and let's press enter. So this is going to install all the various packages for React, and let's wait for it to be completed. And now that we are done, let's open up in VS Code. So this will be opening up our project directory here, and this should be a very familiar site to you. So it's going to be just a create React app out of the box, and under the source folder we will have our app.js where all the magic starts. So here is where we will be doing our editing, and we can already see there's some boilerplate code. And to test drive this, let's actually go ahead and say yarn start on our terminal. Oh sorry, this has to be done within the folder, so let's go into our my app folder here and run yarn start here, and this will spin up our React app. So that's going to be opening up really soon here, and there we have our React app. So what we are going to do now is to actually remove all the header and the pre-boilerplate here. Let's just have a h1 tag which says hello world. So before we go further, let's actually add a CSS framework which is called Bulma, and this is going to help us with all the styling that we require. So let's go ahead to bulma.io. There's an npm install command here. So let's go back to our terminal. Let's stop this with Control C, and let's say npm I bulma dash s, capital S for saving this into our package JSON file. So this is going to install Bulma, and if you don't know already, Bulma is a CSS framework and it's really easy to use. It's used by over 200,000 developers worldwide, so do check it out if you have not yet. We can actually go ahead to our code and let's import Bulma here. So we just need the CSS file, so let's go ahead and find the CSS file under this directory, and let's import it into the main app.js file. So once we do this, the styles will be applied. So let's go ahead and try and create a new form component here as well. So under the source folder, let's create a new file. We will call this form.js, and inside form.js let's export a component called form, and let's just return something like form here for now. Oh, forgot the function keyword here, so let's add that in. So now this is valid React component. So let's go back to our app.js and let's import the form component here instead of the h1 tag. Let's save this and let's kickstart our React server once again. So yarn start. So there we have it, a small text here which says form. So let's go ahead and add some features from Bulma. So let's add some components that we can find. So let's click on getting started here. Let's go into layout and let's click on hero. So let's add a very simple hero here. So let's copy this and let's go back to our code here. So before we add the form, let's add a very simple hero section. And once again, remember that we can't use the keyword class in React components. So what we're going to do is we're going to replace the class keyword with class name. And I'm going to actually select strictly just the class word and replace all. So let's save this, and if we go back to our React app, we can see a very nice hero here. So let's just name this to React Forms with React Hook Form. So we'll be using the React Hook form really shortly. So let's go ahead and add some form fields from Bulma. So again, let's go back and let's go under the form section here, and let's click on general. So we can see all the various form fields that Bulma offers, which is already mentioned here. So this is great. So what we're going to do is to firstly start off with a very simple input component. So let's copy this and let's go back to our form. So under form.js, let's actually create something like a div, and within the div we have all these fields. Once you paste the code here, you will see that there's a lot of errors which is coming up, and that's because we have to close the input tag with a slash here. So once that is done, we can go back to our React app. We can see a very nice input here. Let's actually start to stylize this a bit. So I'm going to go back to our app.js. So instead of starting directly into the section, I'm going to add a class name here, and give it a container class. Within this, I'm going to have some rows, which is given by the columns, and within that I'm going to have a column, and within that goes all these different children elements, and that narrows our form to this level. So what we can do now is to try out all the different form fields. So before I go ahead, we can actually go to a form, and in this div, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a class name which says has text left. Right, so now we have to actually change all the different class keywords to class name. So I'm just going to go and do that. Let's save this, and we can see that we have a left aligned form here. So very nice. So what we're going to do now is to actually use React Hook Forms to configure these elements, and also we need to add a button to submit our form. So those are two things we're going to do. So let's actually first add our button. So let's go back to this Bulma website, and let's open up this code here, and there's an example. I find this button to be really nice. Let's copy that code for that. So that's going to be under here, and I'm going to add it to our form. So here is a field, so right after I'm going to add this. Again, replace the class to class name. Let's save, let's go back, and we can have a nice button here. So that's great. Next step, let's actually go ahead and add React Hook Form. So React Hook Form is, as the name suggests, is a very nice React form library that's very obviously based on React hooks. So it's really flexible and it's really easy to use as well, and it offers really good validation capabilities. This library would suffice for most of your form data needs. So let's get started and let's add this. So I'm going to click on the get started button here, and I'm going to copy this command here, and I'm going to go back to my terminal. Let's stop our app, let's paste this, and let's add a dash capital S here to save this to our package JSON as dependency. So let's wait for this to be installed. And now that we are done, let's go back to our form.js. Let's start to import and use form React Hook Form. So let's take a look at this example that's given. So we need this statement, and we can also copy the standard import React statement. Let's go back to our form.js, let's paste this, and let's also copy these default variables and functions it offers, and this is going to go within the component. So let's save this. So what we have here is actually a form element that when on submit actually calls a function called handle submit, which we have imported, and we give it a function as a variable, which is this on submit. So all the data from your form goes directly into this on submit, and this function simply just console logs it out. So that's the actual logic that goes behind here. And we also need some kind of button to submit it. So we already have a button, but what we don't have is that we need to add a type which equals to submit. So this tells React that hey, when you click this button, this is actually going to submit this form. And now we have to change this div into a form, and let's add this on submit handler here. So that's great. So now every time I submit this form, all the data should be going into here. But how is the data actually being captured? So that's the real benefit of using this library. What we are going to do is to actually use something called this register keyword, which registers this input field, and it registers all the data that goes into this input field. So before we go into that, I want to really show you something that's really, I want to very quickly show you that React Hook Forms also offers you something called a form builder. So going into the form builder, we will see that we can generate all types of input here. So, and on the right hand side you have an example. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply copy this, and let me explain here. So here's the input that we just copied. So it's a very similar to the input that we already have. What's different is that we have a register function here which captures the data that goes into this input, and this is the key that it actually stores it under. So instead of first name, what I'm going to just call this name, and I'm just going to replace the placeholder as name and this label as name. We don't need the help text, let's remove that. And now let's go ahead and start our React app. So yarn start. Alright, so now we have a React app started. So what we can do is to actually copy this class name, let's put it here, and let's remove this entire input field here. So now we have a name field here. Let's also open up our console so that I can show you what it logs. So here I'm going to type in my name, which is Harish, and I'm going to submit, and I can see that React Hook form is already printing this out. So once again, to recap, we have a form field which is registered with this key called name, and any data that goes into this input is registered as the key name. So the key is name, and I've keyed in Harish, so it's captured the name and as Harish. And all this is happening because we have a submit button with the type of submit, and React Hook Form understands that on submitting we will need to pass this to the on submit handler here. And the job of the on submit handler is to simply console log this data, and that's exactly why we are saying this here. And to demonstrate, let's go ahead and add a different field, which is going to be an email field. So here I'm going to say email. I'm just going to say hello at mail.com as a placeholder. I'm going to register this as an email. And React Hook Form, if you remember, I said that it offers good amount of validation. So we actually can add a pattern that should be given. So I can add a pattern for the email here. And what this does is that if you go back and we try to submit this, it highlights that this is a required field. And if you enter some non-valid input, like let's say something like that, and try to submit, it won't let you submit because this does not pass the pattern. So this is a regex format of this pattern, which says that there needs to be an @ sign. And so for example, I need to put something like this, and that is registered as a valid input, and you can see that React Hook Form will print both the name and the email that we have just registered. So as simple as that. So what we're going to do next is to add a text area form. So let's go ahead and add a text area. So let's go and click here. We have a text area that looks like this. We put it here, but again, let's copy the entire div here and put the text area within there. So, and again, I'm going to copy this register function, remove this input, and I'm going to paste it here. So it didn't copy, so let me copy it again and let's paste it here. So here we're going to register, let's say this is a description, and this is a, I'm going to register it as a key called description. I don't need a max length for this, I don't need a pattern for this, but I still want this to be required, right? So what this is going to do is to create a description field here, and let's say hello world, and if I submit this, we can see that React Hook form prints that out here. So description hello world, email is this, and name is my name, which is Harish, which is typed here. So there's some warnings here which says that we need to replace the class with class name. So again, when we copy paste, we forgot that, so let's just replace that. Now that warning should be gone, so that's good. And let's go ahead and add a drop down. So drop down in it's also called the select tag. So under the select tag, you can see a drop down here. So I'm going to copy this entire div that's given by Bulma. Let's add it here. Once again, let me copy this entire field and move this entire select div inside here, and replace the class with class name. And now let's actually go and take a look at how React Hook formats this select options. So under the select element, so under the select HTML element, we have the register. So I'm going to just copy this again, and we have different options for that. So I'm going to put this here, I'm going to register this, so let's call this something else. So options, I'm going to choose the register this as an option. This is going to be a required field, and I'm going to give this various options. So option 1, and then option 2 is this. Let's save this, and you can see that the field is already created. So I'm going to choose option 2 and let's submit, and we can see that description, email, name, and options says option 2. So option 2 comes about because that's the text we have given here. So next, let's go ahead and add a checkbox. So if we actually go back to Bulma's general form section, we can see that there's a checkbox here, and there's also a radio button here. So let's actually try this checkbox. So let's copy that. So this is the checkbox they have given. Let's paste this, let's replace all the class to class name, and let's actually add this. So checkbox looks like this, right? So let's go back to React Hook form and see how they have made the checkbox. So they do not have a checkbox field as example here. Let's create one. So I'm just going to call this checkbox. I'm going to choose the type as checkbox, and I'm going to create, and you can see that it has already added a checkbox here. I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to replace this checkbox element here, and here we can actually put it as required as true. So register this as a checkbox. So now let's go ahead and try and submit this. Let's just refresh our app. So let's go ahead and fill up all of these fields. I'm just going to put some dummy values here first, and this is option 2. I agree to the terms and conditions. Let's submit this, and in here, if we expand this, we can see that a checkbox is true. So that's what we want. And if you uncheck this and submit, it won't submit because this is a required value. I want everyone to agree to the terms and conditions before they submit. So if you don't have it, check, then you can't submit. So if you want this to be an optional field, then of course we are going to remove this required true. Let's go and save this. And now if you submit this, you can see that there's going to be checkbox false. So that's great. And the last one we are going to try and add is the radio button. So for that, once again, let's go back to our form builder. They have also already given a few examples of these radio buttons. But first, let's go to Bulma. Let's go to the radio section here, and let's copy this entire control here. So here I'm going to put it like this. Let's set the slash tags here and replace all the class with class name, and let's add this field div here. Okay, now we are done. So we can see that it shows up here. So the next step is to actually look at React Hook form and see what they have done here. So they have two radio buttons here, and they have given both of it the same key. So this is important. So they've given both the same key. So let's copy this and let's edit it on our code. So here I'm going to put in exactly as what they have done, and I'm going to remove this, and I'm going to put a label to this. So this is going to be a radio field, and here I'm going to register this as a radio. So similarly, I'm going to copy this thing. I'm going to paste it here. I'm going to give a value of yes. And now if we go back to here, we can see two different radio fields here. So I'm going to click on agree, and I'm going to click on yes. I'm going to click on submit. And now if we expand this, we can see that the radio here says yes. So that's about it. We have actually captured the radio buttons input by doing that. And if you change the value to, and we can also change the value here. So we can change the value to something like true, and here the value is going to be false. And if we do that, let's go back and let's refresh one more time. Let's just fill in our usual values. So let's put this option 2. I agree. Radio field is yes. Submit. What we see here, it says radio is true, and that's because we have already updated the value here to be true and false. So I change it to no, and I submit this. We can see that the radio is going to be false. So that's exactly how we actually add the radio button here. So now that we have added most of the fields here, what we need to do next is to actually see how we have captured the information. And all of this has gone directly into this function called data. And the most common way that we use this data is to actually simply to send it to server. So you use Axios or some other fetching library or network library to send it to your server. So send to server. So for now we have just console logged it. So I hope this tutorial was really useful for you to understand how we can actually add forms to our React applications. I have used Bulma here, but feel free to use any kind of CSS framework like Bootstrap or Tailwind or anything else. But the main feature here that we have used is using React Hook form, which helps us to capture the different data that comes into the input fields. So I hope you really enjoyed the tutorial, and I'll drop a link to the code in the description below. And if you have any comments, do drop them to me via email or in the comment section below as well. So I'll catch you guys in the next video.